My name is Kathryn Reed-Edge, and today is May 24th, 2004. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the Tennessee Supreme Court building to interview Judge William H. Inman. This interview is taking place as part of the Legal History Project of the Fellows of the Tennessee Bar Foundation. Judge Inman, for the record, would you tell us your full name and your date and place of birth?
My full name is William Howell Inman. I was born in Morristown, Hamlin County, Tennessee, October 3rd, 1926.
Tell us about your family. I'm particularly interested in your grandparents to start with. Were they born in the United States or did they come from Europe?
They were born in the United States.
In Tennessee?
In Tennessee, both my maternal and paternal grandparents.
What about your mom and dad?
What do you mean, what about them?
Your father was a farmer, is that right?
He was a farmer, that's right.
What did he grow?
Just row crops.
Did you ever have any notion growing up that you might follow in your father's footsteps and be a farmer?
No.
Why not?
In East Tennessee, that's not a very good way to make a living.
Did your parents encourage you toward the law?
No, as a matter of fact, my father didn't like lawyers much. As a matter of fact, he didn't like lawyers at all. And so we never had a conversation about it, and I never discussed it with him.
Do you think that your father would be proud of the career you've had, or would he still just not trust lawyers like mine never did?
Oh, I think he would be. He appreciated attainment and success.
Talk to us a little bit about your childhood education. Where did you go to school?
I went to elementary school in Hamlin County. I was valedictorian of the 8th grade back when that was significant. Made a speech. Took 45 minutes to deliver it. I memorized it.
Do you remember what it was about?
Certainly I do. It was all about patriotism. World War II was about to begin in Europe, and my speech ended with a recitation of Irving Berlin's God Bless America.
The entire one, the entire song?
The entire song.
Did you speak it or sing it?
Ooh, I can't sing, I spoke it. But it took 45 minutes to deliver the speech. And my teacher, 8th grade teacher, is still around, and I never miss an opportunity to remind her of that she made me memorize a speech that took a 13 or 14-year-old boy 45 minutes to deliver.
Maybe that's where you
That's the price I paid for being the valedictorian.
I see. What about college? Where'd you go to college?
Went to Cumberland.
And what did you study there?
Well, I majored in Latin in arts and science. And then from thence to the law school.
All right. On your bio, there is a mention of Harrison Chilhowie Academy. Tell us about that school.
All right. I was a month into my senior year in high school when I decided to enlist in the U.S. Navy, or in the U.S. Marine Corps, really. And I went to Knoxville, the recruiting station, here in this building for that purpose. Hitched a ride with an old gentleman with heavy black eyebrows who growled a lot, but he let me off in front of this building. The Marine Corps couldn't send me away for 2 weeks, but I was ready to go, so I just left their office and went around the corner to the second floor of this building and enlisted in the Navy and left for San Diego that afternoon. I was 17 years and 10 days old. So move the timetable up a few years, and I'm out of the Navy, from active duty, that is. I wanted to go to college on the GI Bill, but I didn't have a high school degree. Ergo, I go to Harrison Chilhowie Academy out at Seymour, a few miles from here, for 10 days. After 10 days, the principal, a very fine gentleman named Gene Stewart, calls me in and says, in effect, "You don't have any business here. Here's your diploma." Really? Handed it to me. "Thank you very much. I don't want a refund," and I left.
You served in the South Pacific in World War II.
That I did.
Tell us about that experience.
I was in the organization known as Acorn 24, Aviation Control, Overhaul, Maintenance, whatever. We went ashore in the Admiralty Islands, just north of New Guinea, in the deep South Pacific. Captured the Admiralty Islands and waiting to go do something else. And after 2 or 3 weeks of mustering on the beach, here comes an Army Air Corps Jeep. This was before the days of a separate Air Force, you understand. Talked to our skipper for a few seconds, and he comes over and says, "Any of you," I quote him verbatim, "any of you SOBs ever operated an aircraft control tower?" I took 2 steps forward and said, "Yes, sir." I was tired of going to the beach every day. So get in the Jeep. So I loaded my gear in the Jeep, and we went to the airfield that we had taken from the Japanese called Mamoti. Mamoti Airfield. It's a coral strip, 8,500 feet long, humped in the middle, rainbow shaped. That's the way Japanese built them, because you land uphill and take off downhill. And 300 feet wide, strictly coral, with a control tower right in the middle, 4,500 feet. 60 feet high, built on coconut palm logs, 12 feet square at the top with a tent stretched over it. They took me down there. I looked at the tower. I decided, well, that's where they want me to go. I'd never been inside an airplane. I had never flown, of course. I had never been in the control tower. I had never been on an airfield. But there I was about to operate a control tower. I climbed up there, and there I stayed for a long time, pulling up jerry cans of water. The only equipment in the tower was what they call an Aldous lamp, shape and conformation of a joint of stovepipe, about 3 feet long, with a lens that could be changed from green to red to amber, and a big bulb in the back attached to a battery, a Japanese battery. And that's the way I control aircraft. A box of flares there with a Very pistol. I knew what those were for, green, and red. Green means everything's okay, and red means something else. But I got along just fine. It was basically a matter of common sense and thinking you were immortal. And there I sat. I stayed in that control tower for 6 months and 18 days and didn't set foot on terra firma. Stayed right there.
What kind of trouble could you have gotten into if they'd figured out you didn't know what you were doing?
Well, not at all. Haven't gotten any trouble, I don't think. But no, I never did. I never had any problems. And in fact, when it was all over, I got a commendation. Got along just fine.
When you got back from the South Pacific and all those adventures as a young man, you came back and you went to college, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
At Cumberland, you said you studied Latin and the liberal arts. Did you ever want to be anything but a lawyer when you were at Cumberland? Is that what you thought about doing?
Katie, I thought a lot about that, and I knew you were going to ask me that question. I never had any counseling from anybody with respect to what I was going to do. I didn't know any lawyers. I had never talked to a lawyer. I had never met a lawyer. It was sort of one of those things like it was an intellectual exercise, and that's what I wanted to do.
Samford Law School is where you received your JD in 1965, is that correct?
I think that's right, yeah.
Why did you choose Samford?
I didn't choose Samford, they chose me.
I see.
Cumberland was moved to Samford. They bought it from the Southern Baptists or somebody. And that's the way that happened. But you skipped over the World War II a little too fast here.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to that then.
Okay.
What else do you want to tell us about your experiences in the South Pacific?
Well, I don't want to go into the gory, grisly details, for heaven's sakes, but I'll tell you one thing that nettled me for 50 years, and still nettles me. That's the reason I want to talk about it. The war had gone on up north, somewhere in the Philippine area. So consequently, there was an occasional civilian plane. Admiralties was strategically located. Yeah, I cleared this civilian plane, a great big Red Cross for landing a four-engine job, and it was American Red Cross plane, touring the South Pacific. They had a donut machine and coffee urn. That's what they were doing. And landed, put them in a revetment, and of course had radio contact by that time. At that time we had good holocrafted radios. I got someone to stand by for me in the tower because I wanted a cup of coffee and I wanted some of those donuts. Now, you ladies probably can't appreciate that fact, but if you hadn't had a cup of coffee in 2.5 years or whatever, or a donut, so cut a path through the jungle. To this good day, I can still smell that coffee, and I can still smell the donuts because they had a little portable generator. We got there, and there were 3 or 4 of us by that time, and lo and behold, they were selling them. Cup of coffee and a donut, 15 cents. Of course, nobody had any money. There was no such thing as money on that island. There wasn't there physically. No one had any money. But they were very adamant. They weren't giving away anything. Selling them, 15 cents coffee and donut. And one of our guys, I always remember him, his name was Omar DeGrays of Kansas City. He kept saying, money? I want a cup of coffee. Well, I got kind of snappy with him. When he realized that he wasn't going to get a cup of coffee and his donuts, he sort of lost himself and he tore up the place. And our skipper came running, got everything calmed down, and told me to get back to work and clear these people for takeoff, and that's what I did. And I haven't had a good feeling about the American Red Cross since, and I should get over that by now after 51 years or whatever. But I still remember that very vividly.
I suspect that they would bring you coffee and donuts now if you ask them real nice, though, Judge.
Yeah, I guess so. But I've gotten over it. It took a long time.
Do you ever have any regrets for having joined the Navy as early as you did?
Oh,
at
best
17?
time of my life, Katie.
All right.
Oh, I have no regrets about it at all.
You had another part of your military service during the Korean War, is that correct?
I went to college and law school. I took the bar examination about 6 months before I was graduated from law school. You could do it in those days. Passed. My license is dated in March of 1950. I was graduated in June. Went back to Morristown, trying to practice law, trying to get started, and I was recalled by the Navy because I was still in the reserve, still am. You're in the reserve. I got caught up in the computer some way, and I I couldn't get loose, so I finally gave up, and I'm still in the reserve. I was recalled to active duty, but by that time I was commissioned. When they learned I was in law school, I was for that time I'd been a specialist Y control tower operator, so they commissioned me an ensign in the U.S. Naval Reserve, and recalled me to active duty. Sent me to Newport, Rhode Island, to the U.S. Naval School of Naval Justice to learn all about the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which became effective sometime in 1951. Something brand new. Something that really upset the Navy Department because we used the old courts and boards and all that sort of stuff up until then.
And you were a prosecutor, is that correct?
Yeah. I don't know really how that happened, Katie. I got my orders. I was up there 6 weeks and got my order just like everybody else did. I had to report to headquarters, 6th Naval District, Charleston, South Carolina, for duty as trial counsel for General Courts Martial for the 6th Naval District. In the Navy, I learned you do what you're told, period, without question. You do it. It's your duty. Great word, duty, one of the better 4-letter words. And so it's strange. Ensign, one striper, green as a persimmon on a young tree. So I reported for duty. Well, the fellow I was replacing was a 3-striper, a commander, regular Navy. And the Navy had sent him to law school after he graduated from the academy. He was strictly a Union man. And he was very much perturbed over the fact that the United States Navy had seen fit to designate a lowly ensign and a reserve one at that to succeed him. And he was very resentful of that fact and gave me a hard time. And I was basically kind of a civilian at heart in a way. I certainly wasn't an officer at heart. I was strictly an enlisted mentality. And I just sort of poo-pooed him, but it turned out to be a great mistake because he was there for about 4 weeks after I showed up to succeed him, and he went on to someplace in Africa. So anyway, I was trial counsel for General Courts Martial, and secondarily, I was family advisor. That was my secondary duties. But mostly, the court martial I had 8 cases a week. That was average.
What kind of cases did you try?
Oh, most of them were, majority of them were AWLs, but a lot of them involved other offenses ranging from theft to murder to this, that, and the other. But most of them were desertion. A lot of them, I'd have one a week, what the Navy called sexual deviant behavior. You can figure that out for yourself, Katie. Back in those days, that was frowned on. It's still frowned on, but more covertly than overtly. But you had about one of those. It always, for enlisted man, it was forfeiture of all pay and allowances, dishonorable discharge, or bad conduct discharge. Officer, it was his dismissal from the service, forfeiture of all pay and allowances. It simply was not tolerated. No exceptions.
No, don't ask, don't tell in the Korean War.
It was not tolerated, period. No exceptions, no matter who.
The trial experience that you had in the Navy, do you think that helped you later on in your law practice?
Well, I think so, Katie. It's tried to say that every little bit helps, but which is true. And of course, that helped. 8 cases a week. So I thought nothing about that at the time, but looking back on it, that was quite a few. Now, under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, a military accused, and that's the word they use, we say defendant, but the military people say accused, had the choice of his own military counsel if reasonably available. Those are the operative words, if reasonably available. And every once in a while, At the beginning, some accused would be shipped to Charleston for trial by general court-martial, and he'd be apprised of his rights, or someone would tell him about it. And he would request that by that time I was a lieutenant junior grade, that Lieutenant Inman be designated to represent him. And of course, I go tell the admiral, I say, I can't do this, I'm the prosecutor. Well, the admiral, everybody, all the high-ranking brass was really concerned about the Uniform Code of Military Justice. They didn't quite know how to take it. It was something brand new, and they didn't want to incur the wrath of anybody. So I would be designated as defense counsel, and they'd bring somebody down from Washington to prosecute. That didn't happen too often, but it happened sometimes. So I did some defense work too, but not much.
Mm-hmm. Once you left the Navy, or you say you're still in the reserve, but at least in...
Released to inactive duty is the expression.
That's right, released to inactive duty in 1952. What did you do then?
Went back to Morristown, practiced law.
Who did you practice with?
By myself for a couple of years, then I went with Ernest R. Taylor, the firm of McCandless and Taylor in Morristown.
Tell us about the early years of practicing law. What kind of cases did you take? How is it different than the practice of law today?
Well, first part of your question, anything that come through the door, I took. A country lawyer practicing general law did that. Didn't have any what I call big city cases like Bernie Bernstein would have. In a big city, you should have. In a small town, you just didn't have that type of litigation as a rule. It was domestic relations and family disputes and automobile accidents, things of that sort.
Were there any types of cases that you preferred to try? You've always been a litigator, I presume.
Yeah, I'm a litigator. Well, as the years went by, when I joined the Ernest Taylor law firm, litigation really expanded on an annual basis. I stayed in court about all the time somewhere. We practiced in a 5 or 6 county area. My sole claim to fame, I think, as a lawyer, is I once tried 5 jury cases in one day.
Now, how did you do that?
Well, you would really have to know the circuit judge, a fellow named John R. Todd, to have a real understanding of what seems to be impossible or incredulous. He was an old man. He was 2 years older than the judge he succeeded, who retired on account of his age. And he was a very energetic old gentleman, and he loved to work, and he expected everybody else to work. He would not tolerate a lawyer who waited until they came to court to select a jury. He wanted that lawyer to do his homework before he got to court, that sort of thing. And if you took more than 3 or 4 minutes to select a jury, you were in trouble, because he wouldn't tolerate it. That's just the way he was. He was a good man. He was an honorable man, and he did a very credible job. But you worked with Judge Todd. I was, like I said, once tried 5 jury cases in one day: a will contest, eminent domain case, and 3 tort actions.
Did you win all of them?
I have no idea, Katie. I've tried 4 jury cases in one day, many, many times with Judge Todd. At that term of court, which lasts 2 weeks that I'm talking about, I tried 17 jury cases, all of them in the capacity as defense counsel, civil, of course.
Have you ever done any criminal work as a private practitioner?
No, not really. When Judge Charles G. Neese was on the bench in Greenville, he was a federal district judge. He was appointed by, sponsored by Senator Estes Kefauver and appointed in 1961. I think that's right. He, for reasons I never really understood, he would appoint me to represent about every bank robber who'd been indicted in the U.S. District Court, Northeastern Division, who wasn't represented by counsel. This was before the days of the Federal Public Defender's Office. And I'd take myself to Greenville and go through that.
Maybe that's your interest in banks. We were trying to decide where your interest in banking came from. Maybe it's representing all those bank robbers.
Oh, I remember one time this bank robber, a young black guy with a stovepipe hairdo, very solid young man. They robbed the bank, and of course they had him on security. They had photographs of him doing it. And he pops up while the U.S. attorney is addressing the jury on voir dire, I think it was. It's before the jury was sworn. And just referred to Judge Neese and using some terrible adjectives, which I'm not about to reproduce here. Astonished everybody, because if the fellow had a friend in the courtroom, it was Judge Neese. He was very liberal. But he didn't know that, and he just said some terrible things about him. And I jerked him down, and then he said some terrible things about me. And then I asked the judge for a recess, because certain corrective measures needed to be taken there. And Judge Neese was pretty upset about that, and I knew he was going to have him bound and gagged. Just a minute, Judge. And so we had a recess, and something happened, and we came back in the courtroom, and the jury by that time was pretty well distracted by everything, and so we proceeded to the trial of the case. And I found him not guilty.
You are an amazing lawyer. Tell us a little bit about your law partners, people you practiced law with before you.
Ernest R. Taylor, senior member of the firm. He was with George McCandless. That name may be familiar to you. Mr. McCandless was Commissioner of Finance and Taxation at one time. He was in Governor Prentice Cooper's cabinet in some capacity. Another time, he was Attorney General of the state another time, and then he was on the Supreme Court of Tennessee another time. I essentially took McCandless's place in the law firm, because he never returned to Morristown. And then Joe Tilson, later on, was a U.S. Magistrate Judge in Greenville, was in the firm, and then Milburn Lyon, formerly General Sessions Judge, was in the firm. And it never got any bigger than that. It was a small firm.
Okay. You became a chancellor in 1972 after having practiced law for 20 years.
20 years, right.
Appointed by Governor Winfield Dunn. How did that come about?
I didn't know Governor Dunn, never talked to him, never asked him to do anything, never wrote him a letter, nothing. It was all done by somebody else. It was running from them to me, not from me to them. But I was kind of ready to do something else. Very real sense, I was kind of burned out. Just running from court to court to court. A jury trial in Newport in Cock County at 9 o'clock in the morning. Jury goes out about a quarter to 12. I get a lawyer to take the verdict for me. I get in my car and I drive 60 miles due north, helter-skelter to Tassel, start another case at 1 o'clock. That was the story of my life for week after week after week, never a vacation. I was kind of burned out, and I was ready to do something else.
Did you enjoy being a chancellor?
In defining joy.
Was it a career that when you got up in the morning, you were glad you were doing it?
That's an interesting concept, Katie. It was a whole lot easier than practicing law. So I guess in that context, I enjoyed it. But philosophically, I'm kind of suspicious of anybody who says that he enjoys being a judge.
Why is that?
Well, a judge deals mostly in human ills and suffering. A judge tries to do justice, whatever that is. And I've been trying to figure that out for a long time. The only definition I've ever read that I remotely understood was St. Augustine. He said justice was given every man his due, you know. And I guess that's about as close as you can get to it. But I learned early on that it's very difficult to do justice on this side of the courtroom with perhaps doing a corresponding injustice on this side. So watch it. Let's balance the equities here as much as possible. And that's not fun. How could that be fun? That's burdensome to do that.
The Chancery Court is not a court that every state still has, and yet Tennessee maintains its chancery system. But isn't that the definition of chancery?
Yeah.
To do
I believe there's
justice?
3 states that has a separate chancery system, but all courts, all states have an equity system, and that's what chancery is. We just happen to have a separate chancery system, but it's not nearly as separate as it used to be.
No. Mostly, you heard cases without a jury.
Yeah.
In the jury cases that you heard, how were they different than the bench trials? Did you like having the jury rather than?
Sure, I could pass the buck to the jury. I liked having a jury trial. Now, keep in mind this, Katie, I sat by interchange with circuit judges a lot. I did a lot of circuit court work as well as criminal court work. When our late lamented friend Joe Henry was Chief Justice, he took the position that a judge was a judge was a judge. And consequently, he wasn't going to hear any judge say, I don't have any experience trying criminal cases, Mr. Chief Justice. Henry didn't recognize that. If you're a judge, you're a judge. Get in there and do your job. And that's what I did. I acted like I knew what I was doing in criminal court. Most of the time, I didn't. But I plowed straight ahead and got along all right.
During your term as chancellor, you also served as president of the Tennessee Judicial Conference.
Yeah.
What was that like? What were your duties as president of the conference?
Chiefly to preside at the annual conference. Didn't have much to do. It was mostly a ceremonial office. It wasn't like being president of the Bar Association, Katie.
Which is truly a ceremonial office.
No, it isn't either.
You also served at one time as the presiding judge of the Tennessee Court of the Judiciary.
I was the first presiding judge of that court when it was created by the legislature.
Tell our audience what the Court of the Judiciary does.
It's a disciplinary body that sits in disciplinary judgment on judges who have run afoul of the rules.
Or at least allegedly. Of the complaints that you heard against judges, or that are heard against judges, what percentage of them do you think probably were legitimate complaints?
Oh, 5%, something like that. Most of them were filed by disgruntled litigants who lost the lawsuit.
Did you find it difficult to be in that role on the Court of the Judiciary after having been president of the Judicial Conference and knowing so many judges across the state? Did you ever feel awkward about that?
No, I don't think so. I have no conscious recollection then or now of being sensitive on that subject. It was just, it was my duty to do it, so I did it.
There you go with that word duty again.
Oh yeah, I like that word. It's the greatest word in the English language, duty.
As a lawyer and a judge, to whom do you think you have owed your greatest duty?
Oh, that's a schoolmarm in you coming out now, Katie. To whom did I owe my greatest duty? Well, obviously to the public, to the citizens of Tennessee, first and foremost. You know, to do justice in accordance with the law.
We have talked from time to time over the years about the concept of activist judges. In this year, 2004, is the 50th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, which probably would not have been decided had not some court decided to make some social change. In what ways do you think the court has a responsibility towards social change, or do you think that courts ought not to be in that business?
It's a matter, I guess, of perspective, Katie. The system wouldn't function very well if there was not a measure of activism involved, obviously. Because sometimes the interest of justice absolutely requires it. A judge clearly ought not to make the law, a court ought not to make the law just because it happens to be peculiarly circumstanced to do it at a particular time. Leave that to the legislature. That's what the legislature's for. But sometimes the case will arrive, the instance will arrive when a judge has no choice if he's going or she's going to do justice other than to become very active, become proactive in doing it. Okay. So I certainly don't condemn this this notion that judges are too proactive. I don't condemn that at all. But I agree that, and sometimes I think they might go a little too far and get carried away with their heavenly role.
Judicial independence is a term that's bandied around a bit when we talk about whether or not there's political influence over the courts. Have you ever felt pressured either by constituents or politics to behave in a certain way as a judge?
Absolutely not. No one ever tried, except one certain congressman called me once on the eve of a trial involving domestic relations problem that one member of his staff was involved in. He called me. It's the only time it ever happened to me, and thousands of lawsuits. And I didn't really handle it very well, because when the case was called for trial the next day, I just announced to a packed courtroom that Congressman so-and-so had called me on behalf of this plaintiff. And would you like for me to recuse myself? Of course, every lawyer said, "Oh, no, Judge, of course not. That wouldn't make any difference." Well, I thought later, what do you expect lawyers to say except that? So I didn't handle that very well. Should have kept my mouth shut. That's the only instance that I ever had like that.
Do you think generally judges today feel maybe, and we've talked about this before too, in the wake of the Supreme Court justice in Tennessee who was not retained because of a perception of a personal view, do you think that judges feel pressure to decide in certain ways how cases ought to go?
I think some judges do, yes, Katie. I think so.
How does that affect the system?
Well, it affects the system adversely, because that's not the way to do ideal justice. You know, when a judge goes on the bench, like me, I took with me all that I was, all my loves, all my hates, all my likes, all my dislikes, all my biases, all my prejudices. Everything that I was went with me. Putting on that black robe didn't change anything. And I learned early on that I could be only as objective as the limits of my mind allowed me to be. And that's a truism, of course. It's something you need to work about. I remember the first case I tried, I leaned back and relaxed, and I thought to myself, well, I don't care who wins this lawsuit, you know. And I was very comfortable with that. I remain comfortable with that. When it reaches a time when I do care who wins it, that's when I'll quit.
Tell us about your role now as a senior judge, what do you do for the court system?
As senior judge, I am eligible for or liable to be designated to try any court or to preside at any case, civil or criminal, from the General Sessions Court right on through the Circuit Court, the Criminal Court, the Chancery Court, the Court of Appeals, the Court of Criminal Appeals, and the Supreme Court. And I've sat on all of them at one time or another. I still do. Wherever they need me, wherever it's my duty to go, that's where I go as senior judge.
It strikes me that maybe your tenure as a lawyer and judge has come full circle, because you told us that one of the reasons you quit practicing law is you got tired of driving around the country. Isn't that what you do a lot now?
Well, there's a certain sameness to trying a lawsuit as a lawyer. And tort action, say, involving an automobile accident, the highway's a little different, the cars are different, the skid marks are pretty much the same, the injuries are pretty much the same, the hospitals and the physicians are pretty much the same, and it got to be a deadly dull routine. But on the bench, it's kind of different.
So all the workers' comp cases don't run together for you?
Well, perhaps we ought to make an exception for workers' comp. Seems like it's usually it's not the same lawyers representing both sides. It's the same physicians are testifying to both sides, and that sort of thing.
Your bio says that you were designated special judge from 1987 to 1992. What does that mean? You've always been special to me.
Yeah. Well, that was before the days, before the legislature created the senior judgeship.
I see.
Special judge served pretty much that purpose. Well, for instance, when Joseph Henry was Chief Justice, he called me to want to know if I could possibly find the time to meet with the court here in the building over there on Locust Street Monday morning, that they had a problem in Shelby County they wanted to talk to me about. And I said, I'll be there, Chief. I hate to use this word again, but it was my duty to go, so I went. And the problem was this: Elvis Presley's father, whose name was Vernon Presley, had remarried following the death of Elvis's mother. The marriage wasn't successful, and they filed an action in the Shelby County system seeking a divorce. The whole process was amicable. After 2 years, though, they were unable to get it heard. They couldn't get on the docket. They waited for 2 years and couldn't get on the docket. And they had judges running out their ears in Memphis. So sort of in a fit of pique, they went to the Dominican Republic and got a divorce. They came back, and Mr. Presley wrote a kind of a mean letter to the Chief Justice complaining about the judiciary in Tennessee generally, and specifically in Shelby County. Hence the telephone call to me. Henry made 2 or 3 calls and confirmed the fact that the divorce docket in Shelby County was 5,500 cases in arrears, which is kind of horrifying. So he brings me to Knoxville and tells me this problem. And he wants to know if would I be acceptable to accepting a designation to go to Shelby County and bring this divorce docket up to date. And I said, sure, whatever you say, Chief. I says, for whom will I be interchanging? See, I was a regular chancellor in those days, and I was still kind of naive. They had 8 circuit judges and 3 chancellors with divorce jurisdiction. So I thought it was kind of unique to be interchanging with 11 judges. He said, you don't be interchanging with anybody. And I said, somewhat sarcastically, I said, Oh, we're creating a new division of the circuit court and a new division of the chancery court, are we? Shouldn't have said it. Henry says, by God, Chancellor, that word supreme means something. I said, yes, sir. Taught me a lesson. So I go on to Shelby County. I call the clerk of the circuit court, Bubba Blackwell, and the clerk and master, John Robertson, and just told them there's going to be a new boy in town. Let's agree on a date. We're going to do something about these divorce cases. Agreed on a date, and I gave them a message to give to call every lawyer, 2,500 lawyers in Shelby County, to call these lawyers and read it to them, make sure they understood it. There'd be no second chance and be no forgiveness. That wasn't involved. No absolution, nothing like that. Let's do it right. So on the appointed day, I showed up. As I was walking toward the courthouse in Shelby County, I saw this 3rd Avenue was blocked with cars and people. I saw all these blue lights everywhere, and I thought, whoop, they've found another bomb in the courthouse. Because the last time I was down there, they ran me out while they brought in the bomb-sniffing dogs. But I found out that I was the bomb. They showed up. They showed up. And I finally found my way up to we're going to use Alice Andrade's courtroom. And I had 5 bailiffs, and it worked out pretty well. They still had the divorce proctor system in those days. You familiar with that down in Shelby County?
No.
When Boss Crump was down there, as running the political show, he got the legislature to pass a private act creating a divorce proctorship for Shelby County. It was kind of a political thing. His job was he would go to the clerk's office, get the files, bring them in the courtroom, and make sure everybody was served, everybody was there. And for that, he got $20 per litigant. And of course, it was very lucrative. Only county in the state that had a divorce proctor. And more about that in just a moment. A fairly small courtroom, so I had the bailiffs bring them in 50 litigants at a time. Swear them in. And first time I did that, in front of the bench, and I couldn't see for the first 10 or 15 feet in front of the bench, I finally saw this old man stood up, waving his arms like that. I said, who are you? He was a divorce proctor. And he said, I object to this. I asked the bailiffs, I said, do you know this man? I said, well, remove him. I was really busy. I didn't want to fool with him. Took him out. Anyway, I tried granted about 800 divorces that first day. Yeah, really. That's just the way it was. And next day and Tuesday, I was in high gear by that time. We started early. We started at 8 o'clock, and I really ground them out. And Wednesday and Thursday. And I went back to East Tennessee Friday and came back the following Monday and went through all that again in the thousands.
So how long did it take you to clear 5,500 divorce cases?
About 5 days. No, 6 days. Excuse me, 6 days.
And on the 7th day you read?
One odd thing about that, Katie, is the following Tuesday, the 6th day when I left, and it was time to go. You know, the newspapers were just raising hell. This chancellor from East Tennessee come down here and running a divorce mill. Of course, that's what I was doing. That's what I was told to do. I did my duty. I assumed that there'd be all sorts of motions filed. You know what I'm talking about there, that all that many cases, something would go wrong, because one of my stipulations, one of my instructions was, don't come to court unless you bring a signed judgment decree with you. So I got Roddy's cramp signing judgments, zillions of them. So I assumed that there would be maybe hundreds of motions to set aside a judgment based upon any number of grounds. Something wrong with it, to correct it, to amend it some way. So I told the clerks when I left, I'm going to be back 32 or 33 days from now, and we'll hear all these motions. I'm going to give you one day. That's the only time I got. We may not be able to get through in one day, but we'll try. Okay. So it was on a Monday. So I called I think it was Friday before Monday, I called John Robertson, clerk of the master, to ask if I had to make me a reservation at the harbor, at the motel just a couple of blocks from the courthouse. He said, don't think you need to come. We haven't had any motions filed. That's the most remarkable thing about that episode. Not a single motion was filed with respect to any of those judgments that were entered. To this good day, I think that remains remarkable. Everybody apparently was satisfied with it.
They were probably just happy to finally get their day in court.
Yeah. Well, sometime after that, and now I'm not sure about my timetable, it was 2, 3, 4 months, something like that, in Tipton County, adjoining Shelby to the north, a town called Covington. The chancellor down there had fallen ill, and there was a certain lawyer down there who had enough political influence with the Chief Justice to get a substitute judge in at the regular term of court. And of course, then Judge Henry again called me, could you do it? I said, well, sure, I'll go down and do it. Just a regular docket. Well, the executive director of the Memphis Shelby County Bar Association, a lady whose name I do not recall, called me that she'd heard about it, that I was going to be in Covington. Wanted to know if I followed the mandate of Kane versus Kane, decided by the Supreme Court sometime before that, maybe a year before that. That's the case, still on the books, as far as I know, still law, where the Supreme Court said that venue is not jurisdictional in a divorce case. So if someone wants a divorce and they live in Shelby County, they can go to Johnson County in the eastern end of the state and get it if they want to, provided the defendant agrees to it. And I said, sure, whatever the law is, I don't have any problem. They said, well, most judges are opposed to it and they won't enforce it. I said, well, I don't think they have that prerogative. That's not included in their oath of office. I said, sure, I enforce it. I don't care. Well, that turned out to be a great big mistake because she passed the word to Shelby County lawyers. In the meantime, the docket had been built up again down in Shelby. So here they were in Covington, hundreds of them. Clerk and master fit to be tied, and a fine old gentleman named Addison A. Bringle, who didn't know what was going on. And I had called and told him to expect it, and I told him, I said, no bonds, get the money going, get a cash bond going in. Mr. Bringle, remember what Omar Khayyam said, take the cash and let the credit go. He said, I don't believe I know him. I said, well, never mind, you don't really need to know him. Just take the money, $85, cash on the barrelhead, and we'll go on from there. Well, I heard cases in my car, on the steps of the courthouse, 1 or 2 in the restroom, and several hundred, because I had to try the regular docket, see. We'd try a contested case, and we'd hear all these uncontested cases. So kind of eased the strain on the Shelby County system again. Shelby County judges didn't much like it, but that was their problem, wasn't mine. I didn't care. When Lyle Reed was Chief Justice, he did the same thing to me, Katie, here in Knoxville. The DUI cases got backed up in the criminal court. You may recall that. There was a lot of hullabaloo about it. There were about 1,200 of them untried. And it was getting to be a real problem. Reed, Supreme Court thought that I could do that too. So I shifted to the criminal court for a long time and tried those DUI cases.
It seems to me, Judge, that your reputation for being succinct has preceded you through your entire career. I have heard it said about you that as a judge, you truly understood how to cut to the chase.
Well, I don't know about that. I've had an email from you once or twice about that, and things I've written for the Court of Appeals. You remember one of them? I suppose that's the way I learned it under Judge Todd. I'd give him credit for that. You don't use 10 words if you can use one. You know, as Mr. Tutt said, lawyers are the most tautological people on earth. They never use one word when 50 will suffice. Just the way things are. Well, for instance, look at a warranty deed sometimes. The grantors have this day bargained and sold, and do hereby sell, bargain, transfer, alienate, and convey. That's tautology. You know, that's using 6 words, each of which means the same thing. Lawyers just that way, very, very wordy. And I try to avoid that, Katie, as much as I can. Just as you, to use your expression, just cut the chase and get it over with.
In your experiences in sort of traveling the state as both lawyer and judge, can you talk about differences that you've seen in the way lawyers practice in the different divisions or across the various counties? Do you see significant practice differences?
Yeah. Lawyers from big firms tend, I think, to practice a little differently because generally they've got a well-heeled client who doesn't mind receiving a bill based upon hours employed in the case, as distinguished from lawyers in small towns who usually don't enjoy that sort of privilege. So there's some difference. I think the biggest difference in the practice of law, and when I was doing it, is we didn't bill by the hour. There was the bar associations usually had a flat rate involved. There was a flat rate for doing this, a flat rate for doing that, and a flat rate for doing this, and that sort of thing. And that's pretty much what we did. Now, of course, a lawyer's life revolves around billable hours.
Do you think that is an improvement in the way law is practiced or a detriment?
It's a point of view, Katie. I saw some stats the other day where less than 2% of all cases filed are litigated. Less than 2%. They're all settled. I know a U.S. district judge who's been on the bench for 18 months, hadn't tried a case yet. Tried some criminal cases, hadn't tried a civil case, they've all been settled. 98% of most civil cases now are settled, and they're settled because after the lawyers work the case up and discover, and keep on discovering, and then finally, when they just run out of steam, it's settled. That's pretty much the way it's done. And I'm not critical of the system. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Anyway, that's the great difference, I think.
We're just about at a place where we need to take a little break, but I want to ask you one last question. How do you think mediation has factored in to the way cases are decided these days?
Well, mediation is a thing of the future, obviously. It's almost a thing of the present. That's the chief reason now why one of the chief reasons why most cases now are not litigated. If the lawyers don't settle them, then they're referred to mediation. They're settled by mediators. Mediation is getting to be real big, and it's a good thing. Anything to avoid litigation.
As a litigator and a judge who has presided over thousands of cases in your life, do you think that the system is better off with mediation than it is in trying lawsuits? Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, sure.
Why do you think that?
Next to dying or having a severe personal injury, the most traumatic thing that can happen to you is going through a contested lawsuit. It's an ugly word. It's as ugly as the word abortion. It's an ugly word, one of the ugliest words in the English language. And it's something to be avoided if it can be avoided. Nobody really wins a contested lawsuit. There's only losers. Someone may walk out with some more money, but winning money is not always necessarily being the winner. So yes, mediation is the best. If you mediate, somebody wins a little bit, somebody loses a little bit. The thing sort of balances out. I admire someone who is really good at mediating disputes.
Have you ever done any mediation?
I've done some. I'm not very good at it. I'm too judgmental. Really, I'm just too judgmental to do it. And the rules expressly forbid a mediator from giving legal advice. And to this good day, I don't see how anybody can mediate without giving legal advice. But I know some mediators, some very competent mediators, and they're able to walk around it without, and they get along just fine. Yeah, I think mediation is a good thing, Katie. Might as well think it because that's where the future is, I think, with respect to the resolution of disputes. You know, the great Moses started it, and he originated, at least I think he did, and we're just now sort of picking up on it.
All things in good time.
Right.
Judge Inman, I met you, as I recall, in 1983 or 84 when I first joined state government, and you were counsel to Governor Lamar Alexander.
1984, Katie, I remember you very well.
Can you tell us how you came to be appointed the governor's counsel?
I'd been on the Chancery bench since 1972. Caseload was terrific because of my duties in the circuit court as well as in the criminal court and the Chancery court, and occasional appellate duty. And I was kind of getting burned out, ready to do something else. I answered the telephone one night, this voice saying, "This is Lamar Alexander." I said, "Okay, what do you want?" It did not register with me who he was because I had never met him. I was not political. And he identified himself as a governor. I said, "Oh, excuse me." And he wanted to know if I'd consider being counsel to the governor. He gave me this speech about all the problems that Governor Ray Blanton had, and he was still trying to, I think the word he used was respectability, and that's a good word. Continue respectability in the governor's office and so forth. And I learned later that Judge Tom Hull had sort of mentioned that to the governor. I told him I'd think about it, and he didn't want to, if I come to Nashville and have lunch with him, talk it over. I said, well, yeah, I guess so. So I did. Like I said, I was kind of ready to do something else. I was tired of being a judge, I guess. I guess that's a fair statement. So we had lunch, and then I went to Washington, and I wrote him a letter and accepted. And that's it.
So
I had no idea what the job entailed. Didn't really care. I knew it couldn't be too serious, or he wouldn't have asked me.
is this like when you climbed up to be the air traffic controller?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same kind of notion?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, something different. Sounded all right. So I did it. And then after what, about a year and a half, something like that, there was a vacancy in the Office of Commissioner of Commerce and Insurance, and his term was about up anyway, and it was no big deal of a job because you had someone else doing all the work, and so I took that for about a year, as Katie said.
Once you got to the governor's office, tell us what your duties were as counsel to the governor. What was a typical day like? Besides, after we had breakfast at the Legislative Plaza every morning.
I inherited a staff, a very nice lady, Cynthia Hires, secretary, nice office. I learned that my predecessor, Judge Bill Koch, every night took two huge briefcases home with him, brought them back the next day at work, all of which mystified me because I had very little to do. And I was always through by 9:30 or 9:45 in the morning, literally. I didn't have anything to do. We had a staff meeting, and it didn't usually amount to much. Just sit there and listen. Say yes or say no or something like that. When Lamar first talked to me, one thing that the only thing he was insistent on was he was the defendant in a lot of cases in federal court, mostly filed by prisoner lawsuits, because we were then in the throes of all this litigation involving prison overcrowding. Every day, problems about prison overcrowding. And he's being sued about that and other things. And he was insistent that I represent him personally. He had some problems with the then Attorney General, and I said, sure, no problem. But a week or two after I arrived, the Attorney General resigned, and another Attorney General, Mike Cody of Memphis, took over, who was a very fine lawyer, and Lamar sort of relaxed. And I still went to court for him occasionally. You remember the time when a criminal judge here in Knoxville held a commissioner of institutions in contempt for failing to respond to habeas corpus? That created quite a stir, and that sort of thing.
Were you involved at all in helping the governor select judges when vacancies occurred on the bench?
Certainly.
What do you remember about that role? How was that done?
The only instructions I ever had from Lamar was he wanted me to submit to him the name of the best qualified person. And he never qualified that by any sort of political affiliation. He said, I want the best qualified person. And that's pretty much what I did. That is what I did.
Are you, do you remain proud of those appointments? Of the people that Governor Alexander put on the bench? Do you think they're good judges now? And I don't even know who they are.
Well, I recall some of them. For instance, Court of Appeals, Western Section at Jackson, David Farmer, Frank Crawford. Great judges, great people, honorable man.
Right.
I think he'll be classified amongst some of the greatest judges the state's ever had. Houston Goddard, Goddard died, got a nice month and so forth. Yeah, sure. I think we might have struck out a time or two, but you can't bat 100% all the time. Things don't always work out the way you think they will, and you can't always tell how a nominee is going to function as a judge. I remember the case of Judge Robert L. Taylor, who presided in this courtroom for so many, many years. He was a member of the firm of Cox, Taylor, Epson, Miller in Johnson City. That firm literally would give new meaning to the word conservative. You would have to redefine the word. Very conservative, extremely so. Plaintiffs' lawyers were just we're just having a fit about it. But he was everything but conservative. Nothing conservative about Judge Taylor, using the word in its commonly understood sense. So you can't really tell about someone, not until you put them in the place where they have to function, where they have to run up their flag. We've all got our best foot forward, Katie, at times. I know I have. I've got my best foot forward now. I'm being very polite.
And we've noticed, and we appreciate it, as a matter of fact. Judge, one of the things that happened during Governor Alexander's tenure as governor were all the bank failures that occurred in Tennessee, and you and I met each other during that period of time. Did you have any role in counseling the governor during that period?
No, you and the commissioner, Adams?
Billy Adams.
They did all that, no. I don't recall I played any role at all. May have, but it was a very minor one. And I think Lamar left it all to you and Billy Adams. I don't think he interfered.
That's my recollection,
Yeah,
and we appreciated it.
Yeah, but he was that way. You had a job to do, and you did it well, and that was the end of it.
Your year as Commissioner of Commerce and Insurance, I recall with some interest, because I think you were reluctant to take that job in the beginning. Talk to us a little bit about what that job was about and what you did as Commissioner.
Well, as I recall, there were 34 different businesses regulated by the department. I had 6 assistant commissioners, one for insurance and one for securities and one for this, that, and the other. And they were all career people. They saw commissioners like me come and go. A fact that I understood, and they kind of tolerated me, and I didn't interfere with them. You do your job, and I'll do mine, whatever it is, if I learn what it is. So I didn't have a whole lot to do. I showed up every morning, and I left every day at 4 o'clock, and got along just fine. Occasionally, something would come up that would pique my interest, like had a health insurance company out of Indiana. Golden Rule, I think is the name of it. Is it still in business? I guess it is. There were literally hundreds and hundreds of complaints against that company when I took over the job, filed essentially because the company would not honor their policy obligations. And so one of the first things I did, I was looking through all these complaints, and they're pretty much the same thing, and I asked the assistant commissioner for insurance, whose name I can't recall, what the problem was, and he just said, well, they won't pay anybody, won't pay a claim. Well, I said, get somebody on the phone for me up there in Indiana. So he got somebody on the phone, this fella, and he was pretty snippy, with me. Well, I was kind of a big shot. I was a commissioner of commerce and insurance for the state of Tennessee, don't you see? And I didn't take kindly to that at all. So I gave them a show cause order. There's a judge in me coming out. Show cause where their license to issue policies in the state of Tennessee should not be revoked.
Did they show cause, Judge?
Well, that was not only an eye-opener, that was an attention-getter. And on the appointed date, I went into the conference room there, that building on West End Avenue. And it was jammed and packed with officials from Golden Rule Insurance Company. All sorts of lawyers, all sorts of briefcases. And I got the attention. I says, now the first order of business is we're going to change the name of this company in Tennessee from Golden Rule Insurance Company to Golden Fleece. Well, that didn't go over too well. Didn't go over well at all. But it got the thing straightened out because 3 or 4 weeks later, most of those claims had been adjusted. And to this good day, there's some people in that company still dispute that I had the right to do that. Of course, I didn't have the right to do that, but it worked. That and you remember the church up at between Elizabeth and Johnson City? They called it the Sinking Creek Baptist Church. It was the oldest church, I think, in Tennessee. They built a new edifice, Baptists call it. An old lady whose forebears kind of started the church had a nephew in New Orleans and who was an architect, and she'd prevailed upon him to prepare the plans. But the plans have to be stamped with an architect license in Tennessee, and it wasn't because he wasn't licensed in Tennessee. Anyway, the church was built, and a big one, big edifice. And one day the assistant commissioner for insurance, I think his name was Johnson, showed up, and he'd prepared a cease and desist order for me to sign. And I read that to my complete astonishment, and I said, you don't really think I'm going to tell those folks that they can't use that church? So I'm not going to do that. Well, he said, in violation of not only the statute, but of the regulations with respect to the fire regulations in Tennessee. And sure enough, they were. The architect had neglected to design any kind of an exit. The entrance was also the exit. There was no way to get out of the building once you went in the front door. Really amazing. Said, oh, I got a problem here. It was in violation of all the rules. But to tell those folks they couldn't use the new building, ooh, no. I told Johnson, I said, the governor would sure appreciate this if I did. So I got in touch with the minister up there and explained the problem to him, and one thing led to another, and we had a meeting in Nashville about it 3 or 4 days later. The state architect, whose name was Fitz.
That's right.
Was there.
Like Fitz.
Fitz was there, and either he or somebody on his staff went up there, took a good long look around, and they designed, they kind of redesigned, designed a remodeling to the rear of the building where they could just satisfy the requirements, and at no charge to these folks. We got it done that way. And about 6 months later, they had another dedication. We got that worked out. That's the way that worked. Little problems like that, Katie. Nothing serious, no big stuff. Well, you know, I didn't have nothing to do. I had
plenty of time to drink coffee with me.
Oh gosh, yeah, lots of time to talk. You and Coleman Hoffman.
What? While you were counsel of the governor and commissioner, you lived in Nashville, at least during the week.
Yeah.
What kinds of differences did you see in just the small town living of Morristown and the big town of Nashville?
Well, of course, there's a lot of difference. I lived in that multi-story apartment building. I wasn't accustomed to that. It's a little cramped rooms, but I didn't take any meals there. I always ate out. There's all the difference in the world. It's hot and cold, light and dark. Monday to Friday, 5 days a week. I was always, frankly, glad to get away from the place. And I stayed through Lamar's term, first because he wanted me to, and secondly, I never been much of a quitter. Just stay with something, you know. So I just stayed with it to the bitter end. Didn't really want to, but I did.
Talk to us about your family during your career. You are married and have 2 children.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When did you meet your wife, Billy?
Billy and I met in junior high school in the 9th grade.
What was her maiden name?
Hisey, Hisey, okay. Billy Thompson Hisey. We met, she was my girl in the 9th grade, and she continued to be my girl, and she is still my girl. She's suffering from ill health, of course, very unfortunate, because she was always very bright, very intelligent, played the piano, sang a lot. She can't do any of that now, but she's still my girl. You know, and I ask her, she has Alzheimer's, you know, and I ask her, who am I? She says, you're William. She calls me William. And who's William? She says, you're my best friend. You know.
That's the definition of a perfect marriage.
That's what she says. She says, you're my best friend. Like I saw her this morning. I knocked on the door, opened it, and she says, oh, I thought that might be you. You're my man. I said, yeah, I'm your man. Been around a long, long time. She's with assisted living, in case you haven't picked up on it. She's been there about a year now. But she gets along just fine, not getting any worse.
Your son, Dennis, is a federal magistrate, is he not?
Dennis Hisey Inman, he succeeded me on the Chancery bench. And then from there, he went to the federal bench. Good fella, smart guy, smarter than his pap, really. I don't say that because I want to, because he is, you know. Very fine fellow, very fine judge, highly regarded, highly respected.
And your daughter, Olivia, is
Olivia, my dear daughter, is a teacher at Morristown West High School.
What does she teach?
Special ed.
Oh, that is special.
It's just the most difficult of all teaching jobs, I would imagine. But she's been teaching special ed now for a long, long time, and likes it very well, and of course they like her. I think she likes it principally because occasionally she can see the good that she does.
My father, who was also a farmer, chastised me roundly once when I decided to leave the honorable profession of teaching and go to law school. Why would you want to leave such an honorable profession and be a lawyer, he asked.
I've wondered the same thing about you, Katie.
I guess my question
many times, yeah.
I guess my question to you is, do you think that Olivia is younger, is she not, than your son?
She's 6 years younger than Dennis, yes.
Do you think that she saw just enough lawyers in the family and she decided to go into teaching instead? Or was that just her calling the way law was your calling?
Well, I suppose that's probably a true statement. I really don't know because we never discussed it. I never discussed even with Dennis anything like that. I remember telling Dennis one time when he finished the 8th grade that he could go to any private school in the country that would have him, and he wasn't a bit interested in going to a private school, and that ended that conversation. Then when he graduated high school, I told him he would welcome to go to any university in the world that he could get in, and I leave that up to him. And I don't really know how many colleges or universities he applied for. I have no idea. But he went to the University of Tennessee. And I knew he was in the College of Arts and Sciences down there. I knew that. And he was president of his fraternity, Sigma Nu, and he lived in the frat house. And at the beginning of his senior year, or what I thought was his senior year, I went down, it was in Knoxville. I had court down here or something. And drove over there to have lunch with him. Went to the frat house. Where's Dennis Inman? Well, he's not here. Where is he? Well, he's moved out. All that was news to me. Where did he move to? Well, down on Mount Castle. Where's that? So they told me where it was. I went down there, and there he was. What's going on? Well, he said, I'm in law school. I said, since when? Have I lost a year? Just for a few seconds, I was kind of confused about it. So I lost a year. No, he went to law school where at a time when the first year of law school counted for the 4th year of the academic year. And after 1 year of law school, you got your undergraduate degree. Kind of like I did at Cumberland. Mm-hmm. Except I never did go back and pick up my degree, and Dennis did. And that's the only time I knew Dennis was going to law school. I had no idea that he was going, because he never mentioned it to me, and I didn't mention it to him.
Another independent Inman.
Well, I always assumed, without talking to him about it, that he would most likely go to veterinary school because he always had an affinity for animals. You know, he'd pick up snakes, put in his pocket, still does, that sort of thing. He was always on good terms with animals. They understood him, he understood them, that sort of thing. So I just assumed that's where he'd go, but he didn't. He went to law school.
Do you have grandchildren?
One granddaughter, Sharon.
How old is she?
She's 30 years old, Dennis's daughter.
Okay.
She's a loan officer at, where else? Union Planters Bank.
The audience won't understand why we're laughing, but that's okay. One of the things that I think is you have many great contributions to the legal profession, but your editing of Gibson's Suits and Chancery, I think, is a remarkable accomplishment, particularly in light of the schedule that you have always kept. How did you find time to do that work?
I did it twice, you know.
Yes.
To this. I did a lot of it while I was on the bench. But, I cocked on the book and I cocked on the witness, that sort of thing. I guess the statute of limitations is run, so I can confess that. I did a lot of it on the bench, and then at night and on Saturdays and on Sundays and holidays, where I had access to a copy machine, that sort of thing, access to a library. It was really no great accomplishment, Katie. It just took a while. It must have took me 2 months.
Why did you decide to do that?
I was asked to do it. And because I did so much of it on state time, I assigned all the royalties to the Walter State Community College Foundation.
I see. So now even if the statute of limitations hasn't run, you're safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the other activities besides judging and being involved with your family that keep you occupied? What else do you do in your spare time? Spare time might be a foreign concept to you.
Well, not really. I stay pretty busy, but not all that busy. See, as a senior judge, I'm not required by statute to work full time. But I learned a long time ago, there's really no such thing as working part-time. You either work or you don't work. You're either a lawyer or you're not a lawyer. You're either a judge or you're not a judge. You really can't do it part-time. And those that try usually wind up falling flat on their face. So I stay pretty busy judging. But I've got a house to look after, just me and the dog there. And I do that because I have a housekeeper part-time. And look after, I've got 5 or 6 acres to keep mowed, a lawn to keep mowed. And recreational, I don't do anything. I don't hunt or fish or golf or anything like that.
As I recall, you like to read.
Yeah, you might say that. I still read about a book a day, something like that. And
in your spare time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's how I remember it, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about Walter State Community College and what your involvement there is.
My involvement is with the foundation. We've got the largest foundation of any junior college in Tennessee. In fact, the largest foundation of any college except the universities. We had an annual meeting of the trustees last week. It's been very successful. I think the student population is something like 6,000, and close to half of them they're on scholarships, furnished by the foundation. But times are hard because the return on our investments is very, very low, while tuition is going up. We're working against each other. Used to be a boy or girl could matriculate there for around $500 a semester. Now it's close to $700 a semester, about $1,400 a year. So you can imagine it takes a corpus of about $60,000 to $65,000 just to produce enough revenue to pay that tuition, not to count books and so forth. But we try, and we've raised a lot of money and continue to raise a lot of money, because now it's kind of a self-perpetuating sort of thing. People have found out about it. People understand that that is one good way, one sure way of giving away money that'll be used properly, because we use 100% of it for students. No money for expenses. We've never paid out one dime for expenses.
What's the criteria for scholarship for students who receive foundation money?
It varies according to the grant. I've written several of those, by the way. Some scholarships are limited to the children of parents of a certain church, regardless of need. If they go to a certain church and they want a scholarship, they're entitled to it, period. We have several hundred that way. Others depend upon need. Others depend upon scholastic ability, that sort of thing. But all in all, the director of our scholarship program very wisely looks with a good deal of favor upon just about every request for scholarship, if there's any merit to it at all.
And you say you have about 6,000 students, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Walter State is in Morristown,
Yeah.
Is that correct?
They had a commencement exercise week before last. As a matter of fact, Dennis, my son, was the commencement speaker.
How nice.
There were 5,000 there. That was the largest audience he'd ever had to speak to.
Was he nervous?
Dennis? Dennis wouldn't be nervous if he set off a firecracker in his hip pocket. No. He sailed right through it.
People will not forgive me if I don't ask this question, but you are a prolific reader. What do you read? What do you like to read?
It's most anything, so long as it's printed in English language. Fiction, sure, I like fiction. I have no opposition to reading fiction. I like fiction. I like recreational reading. And I like biographies and things of that sort.
Of the biographies that you've read, do you have a favorite character?
Most recently, David McCullough's John Adams. I thought that was a very, very readable book, a very fascinating book. I enjoyed reading that.
Okay. I'll have to pick it up.
Right now I'm reading an author named Wilbur Smith has written a series of books, mostly set in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, historical fiction, what they are, but very, very readable.
I remember that we used to exchange books on occasion. I meant to
Yeah.
actually bring you some of them
Yeah.
back here. But
Gosh, yeah, why don't you?
I will. Let's talk about the what impact you think your career has had on the judicial system in Tennessee. Aside from cleaning up the divorce docket in Shelby County, which is no mean feat, you understand, what do you think that contribution will be remembered as?
Lawyers know that for instance, in the world of domestic relations, that I'm pretty predictable. They pretty much know before they come to court what I'm likely to do with respect to the division of marital assets and that sort of thing. And I think that's a pretty good quality. No lawyer in his right mind likes to go before a judge who's unpredictable, for heaven's sakes. Because you have no idea and you can't advise your client what's likely to happen. It's just a guessing game. So I guess as judging goes, the fact that I am predictable probably stands me in good stead. I don't think I'm pigeonholed as a liberal or conservative one way or the other. I hope not, because there's a touch of liberality in all of us, and a touch of conservatism in all of us, and just depends upon the facts and circumstances. There's a time to be conservative, and there's time to be liberal. There's time to be generous with an award, and a time to be not so generous. Just depends upon the facts and circumstances.
That's what judging is all about then.
Yeah, well, judging, at least in the philosophical sense, is to deliver as good a brand of justice as you can if you know what it is.
We are nearing the end of our discussions here. And I know that there are probably 100 stories that I haven't asked you about.
Maybe 1,000.
Probably 1,000. What else would you like to tell us that I haven't asked you about?
Shortly before I went on the bench, I was employed to represent American Inca Corporation in a patent infringement lawsuit. It was a subsidiary of a Dutch-owned company, one of the larger textile manufacturing plants in the world. It's very interesting because 5 lawyers had formed an entity to sue all the major chemical companies in the United States for patent infringement. And their entity had purchased an assignment of a license to manufacture rayon issued by the German government before World War II to an old man named Geiger. They purchased that license and then set out and filed suit against these 6 major chemical manufacturers in the United States. Also, these same companies did business all over the world, but they chose to file suit in the United States for infringing the patent of Mr. Geiger. And I never defended a patent lawsuit. I knew what a patent was, but that's about all. It didn't look much like a lawsuit to me, but I soon set up and took notice because they started settling all these cases. big bucks. I remember the last case they settled, DuPont settled. DuPont paid them, I think it was $8 million. Some company paid him $30-something million. Well, they told Judge Neese in Greenville that we saved our best case for last, referring to this one against American Income. You know, I said, how's that again? Save the best for last. And we just took depositions all over the country. And set it for trial January through May. Disney set aside 5 months. And he had a rule, the lawyers must have a pretrial conference at least 24 hours before the case was for trial. The case was going to be for trial starting on a Monday, so on Sunday at the law firm, bank building where the office was, just going through the motions of complying with Judge Neese's order. These lawyers from there, one of the lawyers had resigned his position as Attorney General of the state of Florida in order to do this. Another lawyer had a had a doctorate. He had a Doctor of Science degree in chemistry. He also had a doctorate in textile engineering. Very bright folks this little country boy was fooling with. They settled for all these big bucks, and I just took the position with them consistently that I'm a litigator, I'm not a negotiator. If you want to settle, go see somebody else. Don't talk to me. On this Sunday afternoon, Mr. Ferguson comes in my office, and he's at a loss to understand why I won't offer me any money. I don't have any money. I told you I'm a litigator, not a negotiator. One thing led to another. Make this story short a little bit. Finally settled that stupid lawsuit for $17,500, which was roughly the expenses that we were going to incur in 3 or 4 days. And because I had all these people coming from Holland, I had a motel reserved in Greenville. I had all these plane tickets to buy. I don't think to this good day these Dutchmen have ever quite understood what happened. But what I want to tell you about, I had pleaded champerty and maintenance, and champerty and barratry.
And you want to explain to folks that have been out of law?
Katie?
Well, I learned them in law school.
Yeah.
You want to go back over them again?
Well, these PhDs I was fooling with, they'd never heard the expression champerty and barratry. I had pleaded that. Now, we're in the U.S. District Court, you understand. Nevertheless, I pleaded. Well, they didn't know what it was, and didn't bother to look it up in Black's Law Dictionary, and just sort of poo-pooed it. But Judge Charles G. Neese got serious about it. And when they got serious about it, they thought, well, we better take another look at that. It means stirring up litigation. And that's what these guys had done. See, they certainly stirred it up. I'm not saying anything wrong with it, but they sure stirred it up real big and made millions and millions of dollars because all this settlement money was theirs. They didn't have to share that with anybody. You know, and I was riding that horse pretty good. It's just kind of my defense in a stupid song. Of course, I denied the validity of the German patent and denied the validity of this, that, and the other, just to aggravate them. But anyway, something happened, and they got excited, and we settled it for just practically nothing. And the clerk, Ms. Agnes Hawkins, took great pleasure in calling radio stations on Sunday afternoon, put the word out on the air to stop these 300 Vietnammen from coming in tomorrow. Only one showed up. And then Judge Neese had what amounted to a 5 months vacation.
And the moral of this story is?
Moral of this story is, you asked me a question about it, and I just answered it. There's really no moral involved to it at all. It was just another lawsuit.
Judge, if you had to, and this is my last question to you today, if you had to name your your most significant accomplishment not just as a lawyer or a judge, as a person, what would it be? Of what are you the most proud?
My military service. Because without that, I wouldn't be here, Katie.
Tell us what you mean by that. So what you learned in the military?
Well, the GI Bill. I most likely would never have gone to college without the GI Bill because I wouldn't have had the financial means to do so.
So a decision you made at 17 years old and 10 days, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Changed your whole life.
It sure did. No question about that.
Thank you, William Inman. You are my friend and colleague, and I will always appreciate you. Thank you for this.